Keshava Nandha Bharathi was a man of deep faith. He was a Hindu priest. He lived a life devoted to his religious practices. He believed in the sanctity of ancient traditions. These traditions were the bedrock of his faith. Keshava Nandha Bharathi saw them as essential to his spiritual life. The year was 1954. India was a newly independent nation. The nation grappled with change and tradition. Keshava Nandha Bharathi found himself at the heart of this struggle. It was a struggle that would reshape the relationship between religion and the state in India. The state of Kerala, where Keshava Nandha Bharathi resided, was on the cusp of social reform. The government sought to modernize Hindu temples. It wanted to make them more inclusive and accessible to all. This was a noble goal. However, it set the stage for a clash between the state's vision and individual religious freedoms. The state of Kerala introduced the Madras Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Act. This law was intended to bring about significant changes in the management of Hindu temples. The act aimed to eliminate corruption and malpractices. It also sought to ensure the fair distribution of temple resources. The act's provisions, however, went beyond administrative reform. They touched upon the very core of religious practices. The law gave the government the power to appoint temple staff, manage temple finances, and even regulate certain rituals. For Keshava Nandha Bharathi, this was a step too far. Keshava Nandha Bharathi believed that the state's interference in temple affairs was a direct assault on his religious freedom. He argued that the government had no right to dictate how Hindus practice their faith. He felt that the new law threatened the sanctity of age-old traditions. At the heart of this case lay the fundamental question of where the line should be drawn between state regulation and religious freedom. India's constitution guaranteed the right to freedom of religion. It also empowered the state to make laws for social welfare and reform. This case presented a complex legal dilemma. Keshava Nandha Bharathi argued that the state's power to reform did not extend to interfering with the essential practices of a religion. He believed that these practices were integral to his faith. He argued that any attempt to regulate them amounted to a violation of his fundamental right. The government, on the other hand, contended that the law was enacted with the best interests of the Hindu community in mind. They argued that the reforms were necessary to eliminate corruption and ensure the proper management of temples. The government's position was that the law did not infringe on religious freedom. Instead, they argued it aimed to create a more equitable and just system for all Hindus. Section 4. The Courtroom Clash. The case reached the Supreme Court of India. The courtroom became a battleground for one of the most significant legal debates in post-independence India. Keshava Nandha Bharathi's lawyers argued passionately. They defended their client's right to practice his religion freely from state interference. They presented historical evidence and scriptural interpretations. They aimed to demonstrate the integral nature of the practices being challenged by the new law. The government's lawyers countered with their own interpretations of the Constitution. They emphasized the state's duty to ensure social welfare and reform. They argued that the law was enacted within the bounds of the Constitution. They maintained that it was not discriminatory against any particular religion. The judges listened intently to both sides. They recognized the gravity of the case. Their decision would have far-reaching implications for the balance between religious freedom and state authority in India. Section 5. A landmark decision. After careful deliberation, the Supreme Court delivered its verdict. The judgment in the case was a landmark moment in Indian legal history. The court recognized the importance of religious freedom. However, it also upheld the state's right to regulate secular aspects of religious practices. The court drew a crucial distinction between essential and non-essential practices of religion. The court held that the state could regulate non-essential aspects, but it could not interfere with practices considered essential to the religion. The court acknowledged the government's intent to reform temple administration. However, it ruled that certain provisions of the act did indeed infringe upon the right to religious freedom. Section 6. The enduring legacy of Keshava Nandha Bharathi. The case had a profound impact on the interpretation of religious freedom in India. The judgment set a precedent for future cases involving the balance between state regulation and religious practices. It established the essential practices doctrine. This doctrine empowered courts to determine which aspects of religion were beyond the purview of state intervention. The case underscored the delicate balance that needs to be maintained in a pluralistic society like India. It served as a reminder that while social reform is crucial, it should not come at the cost of fundamental rights. The legacy of Keshava Nandha Bharathi lives on in the annals of Indian legal history as a testament to the enduring power of individual liberty and the importance of safeguarding religious freedom.